absolutely love it, man. You're sharing a lot. And we talk about, it's funny because I'm like, Seth, I'm going to have you jump in.
Seth's like,
Because he's going to jump in. Well,
No.
because we've kind of talked about this. Once you've accepted Christ, once your eyes are open that you need that, if you really, really then say, I really want that relationship, this like inner compassion comes out where you want to serve others and share that with others. And also this desire to get to know God. You don't have to throw your brains in the trash. In fact, quite the opposite. To actually be a Christian, you become a more effective Christian to study science, to study truth, and to even have this sense of like, I love. What did you say? It gave you a platform with even an atheist when you have this conversation,
100%.
because you've been there.
Yeah,
that's what you brought up the other day, Seth. When you start talking about your identity as a baseball player, it gives you an avenue to have that conversation because you've been there where your identity is in that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Before you talk, let me. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
I'm just joking, man.
No, but some of the things that you were saying, Joey C. Cunha, I'll get that. But one of the things you were saying is about how you were intentional in many of these different ways, and you talked about how your life, you had all this money, but you're blowing through it.
Yeah.
I'm good at that.
You're good at that too. Yeah. Well,
It's home ownership, bro.
That's why I rent. And because I can't afford anything.
Yeah. I get you. I'm with you with that. Yeah,
all right, great. So even it goes back to social media. You're saying that social media is a mirror of the things that we look at.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of Galatians, I believe 6:8, where it talks about what you sow to the flesh, you will reap of flesh, and you'll reap destruction. And what you sow to the spirit, you will reap eternal life.
Yeah.
And that's what we see in our social media accounts is what we're sowing into. We're going to reap it. It's going to be what we see. And for you and your relationship with money is you are sowing into money and sowing into this idea of your life, and that's brought you to a place where I don't have anything, where I could have maybe been a little smarter, but I was reaping into this fleshly life, and you were at a place where there was nothing. Like, God, what do there's got to be more. There's got to be more. I'm empty inside, and so you were sowing into flesh. But then the moment you started sowing into the spirit, saying, Lord, how can I serve you? Is when you started to reap things from the spirit, which brought you into the place where you are. And I've talked to Alan and John about this, but what is something that you learned, from your business acumen, for you guys, you were, police officers, trainers, you got this notebook that comes from homicide, and you were talking about this earlier, and so things that you have learned that you can now use to glorify God. Is there anything specific that you would say, this is something that I can point back to?
Yeah, no, I think the big piece with that is he actually uses the business to sanctify me, right? Just like I feel like he does like a marriage or kids or any of his blessings, right? Like they're to be successful, it literally, again, if you want to read the greatest leadership book of all time, it's the Bible, right? Yeah. And so when you look at, like, you got to be a servant leader, right? And so much about, again, even being, I'm sure you guys have seen the statistics of like the father in the household and like, how important it is, right? And all the things. But the same thing within, our, leadership is so heavy, it goes both ways. Satan is also a great leader, But on the same side of that, right, what is he leading you towards, right? What is, again, the foundation and all those other things? He's really great at manipulating. He's really great at deceiving. He's really great at all these other things. And if you actually look at the opposite side of that of Jesus, is like, well, what's the opposite? And I think you might want to compare this like from this other way. Is like leadership can feel like manipulation, but the difference is what you're leading them towards, which is, I'm not leading you to serve me. I want to serve you, and I want you to help you get to everywhere you want to go. And I think that's the other way with too, is when we look into like the business wise, is there's so much. I asked somebody this the other day. We were at Bible study, and this guy was very vulnerable in our group, and I thanked him for it, because I feel like you can't. It's like a GPS system, right? Like I can't get you direction to where you want to go if you can't identify where you are, right? And so if he needed to identify, and he like put a landmark, right? This is where I'm at, right? And he's like, man, like, early on in our and this just tells you vulnerability. Here it is on a podcast now, right? But it's just like him just saying like, man, like earlier in my relationship with my wife, right? I was going to school to be a tech and all these things. And, you know, when we would go out, we would go after school, we would go to a bar or whatever, right? And I'd come home and my wife would be like, or, you know, to-be wife, right? His fiance, his girlfriend would be ask him like, oh, like how was school? Like all those things. And then he'd be like, I would tell her about the school, but I wouldn't tell her that we went to the bar afterwards, right? And so it you know, he was sowing this distrust, right? And it came out, right? What was done in the dark came to the light, and it was more about, you know, just like, why wouldn't you tell me? Like, why wouldn't you do these other things? Well, how did that leak over where he was saying, you know, now it's like, now, you know, for my job, like I have to go work all these extra hours, right? I have to go in at 10:15, I get a random call at night. And, you know, I think he's an x-ray tech or like an anesthesiologist or something like that, right? When it comes to some of these things. So anyway, so he'll get called in, right? And he's like, then I've worked all these hours and I'm sacrificing for my family. I'm doing these things. And then I walk in the door and she has a distrust for me. She's like, were you really working? Were you really this thing? And he's like, you know, how that left him feeling, right? And then I share with him, I said, hey, because as you were asking, I'm going to tie it back in and land the plane, is that one of the things I share with him, like, hey, I don't have kids. Like I don't have a family, but one thing that God has used our business to teach me and sanctify me in this area, and maybe this is a seed for you, and if it is, you know, God just pulling on me to share this with you, is that sometimes I feel like that in our business, right? Because I have to put so many hours in. I have to do so many things when nobody's watching. Our employees don't know. When they're home sleeping, I'm at 3 a.m. stressing, coming up with ideas, you know, going, you know, working when no one else is working, all these things, right? And so I'll get this, you know, it starts building up, right? And it starts doing those other things. And then, you know, God, you know, will come and wrestle with me about it, right? And he'll go, oh, so, you know, like you feel not appreciated for all the things that you've done. Oh, okay, you feel like that, you know, it's not being noticed. You feel like, you know, you're giving and it's not, you know, all these things, right? And then he pointed me back to the Bible, right, where it's like, if we're doing things for the if we're doing things for man's praise, right? Like that will be our reward, right? And that will be it in our reward. And so one of the things also too, it's like, then he comes back and goes, you know, out of all the things, right? Like that God has done for us, that we don't even have the consciousness to understand the depth of everything he's prepared for us. He's built, I know that there's somewhere on earth that he's built the most beautiful, amazing creation that no human will ever see, right? And because of his integrity, he built it anyways. He didn't do it so that he can be praised for it, right? He didn't do it because it's out of his character. It's not because of our character, right? So one of the things I went back to him, I was like realizing too, is like, for example, like at work, right? Is I'm not doing it so that my staff can come back and praise me. I'm not doing it so our customers can come spend a whole bunch of money. I'm not doing it like the extra time that I spent on this one little fine detail has nothing to do with someone noticing, but it has more to do with my worship to him and everything he's done for me. And I'm doing it out of, you know, my character, right? I'm doing it out of what God's done for me and my worship back, not because I need that as well. So that's why I was going to pull that back, is like, I've realized more and more, because it's so easy that when we sacrifice a lot, when we give up all these things and we really are challenged and all that stuff, we start to we become our own mini gods, right? We start to build up pride. We start to have all these other things, and we start to self-worship, right? And I think for me, when I look at that, is he's used that within the business, right? Is that I've had to sacrifice more than I've ever had to sacrifice. And again, I can't share the experience of having a family and what that also, you know, I can only guess what that would feel like.
It's a pain sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Is this all worth it?
Yeah. But again, that's what it kind of feels like to me too, is like, again, as a father, is just a root spiritually where I can connect, is just like, man, like we all know what it feels like to feel underappreciated or not noticed or you know, all those things. But if we redefine that spiritually, like how we're carrying it, you know, and realizing that it's not about, you know, the recognition of it, like, but it's just like, again, being more like Jesus, where it's like, if no one's around and no one noticed that I did this, like, for example, you know, like God always, I don't know, this is like a small thing, but God always has me, when I'm walking, I always see nails and screws on the ground and I pick them up all the time. Right. And, but I always think, I'm like, that's somebody's tire. Right. And so the other day, literally one of my employees, he's driving home. Like he woke up in the next morning and his tire's flat because he ran over a nail or something, right? And his tire is $500 because he's got a Tesla and high performance tire, blah blah blah,
Tesla
and all the things, right? And then I'm going the same thing too. Is like when I look at that, right, and I'm understanding it's like the same thing. It's like that's such a small act. It's like 99% of the time, no one will ever see me pick up a screw or a nail or whatever, right? But again, I think it's just the testimony, like as well as like I know Jesus is going to pick up that nail, like or that thing because he's thinking about somebody else and within service, but.
That's really good. So you switch the paradigm for your leadership to being I want to get to the top to I want to serve others, and that's just a beautiful testimony that you get to share.
To be fair, I want to say with this, it's a spectrum, right? I fall. There's days that I have to, God has to come back to me and recenter me because again, right? I'm an athlete. One thing I think about that in my head, like as an athlete. I spent a large majority of my life to this point being taught that you need to lose so I win. Yeah. And that happened for a really long time, right? Yeah. And so I have to, that's not how God, and that's not, the Bible in that way of what wins and losses, and, that's not the scoreboard, right? And so, and achievement and all those things, right? And so I just wanted to point that. One of the things I always say is like, we'll be in Bible study group and I'll be like, sometimes, right? Because like, I'm on that journey and it just matters like what week, how many things have I let stack up that I haven't talked to God about, or I'm not just being honest with him that I'm like, I'm struggling with this and I'm not even willing to look at it. And also too, I'm holding back from bringing this to you when it's silly, right? What am I hiding from you? Right. Yeah. But like, again, he's so patient with me, and at the same time, I think that's important there where it's like, I don't like to like do it like it's a check mark, like, oh, I'm good here. Check. Yeah. Right. It's we're going along that route. And I don't know if you guys know Pastor Judd from a Central Church. Yep. Mm-hmm. But he talked, I really love this part of like sanctification, how he explains it, but he kind of talks about it because the enemy uses it as a ploy to get to us, right? Is the ups and downs of our faith walk. Right. And he talks about like a spring dropped on its side where it's spiraling and there's ups and there's downs, right? So like, let's say you're on your path, you've been walking with God for 20 years and all of a sudden he catches you at, you fall, right? Yeah. And you slip. And then the enemy goes, see, told you haven't changed. Told you you're the same person. Told you don't deserve to be here. Told you, and here comes the attacks and all those things, right? But Pastor, gave this great analogy of just like, hey, like you are, like your relationship is where it is, with God. You are further in your walk. You do know all these other things, but there is ups and downs. It's not this straightforward path where I'm just like, I'm more sanctified now, and I'm more, I'm just this other thing, I am progressing, but at the same time, he's revealing these things to me based on like the environment that I'm in and the awareness that I'm gaining and all of that, Yeah.
We talked about it a long time ago. I used to, when I started serving at the church, I would always want the pastor to see me. Hey, look, I'm here. I'm serving. Hey, look at me. Hey. And then there's something switched. But then when something switched, I decided that I'm going to do it just for God. Yeah. But then I got this false sense of humility as well. I'm like, no, this is not for me. And then I'm like, I'm fake on that too. I'm like, how do I become real, Yeah. And then there came some point where I'm like, none of it matters. The only thing that matters is that we glorify him and that we do this for him. Yeah. I still catch myself, like you said, sometimes. Yeah, for sure. Like when I look at like, how many downloads did we get? I'm like,
the flesh. The flesh is a real thing all the time.
Yeah, but I understand it more. But it was a good couple of years where I was in this roller coaster of like, look at me. Then I'm like, no, don't look at me, but look at me not looking at me. Does it make sense? Yeah. Like, he's so humble. This guy's so humble.
Yeah. We've said it. I'm so proud of my humility.
Right.
Yeah. Dude. You obviously, we could go on, and we're going to have you back. Yeah. We're going to keep talking, by the way, but I'm just saying there are so many topics we can jump in on. We're talking about kind of as you achieve things, whether you're an athlete, whether you're in business. Yeah. You have to be motivated. You have to have other people encourage you to get better at whether it's an athlete, business, stuff like that. But as Seth just pointed out, changing the way you think about it, though, like I actually want to be prayerful that I have a business that's successful, but that I might glorify you and use it to serve others. Like money magnifies who we are in our position. Yeah. And sadly, you see all these famous people that end up committing suicide and all these things because they're not grounded in anything. They've achieved. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they realize, like, I've achieved, yet I am totally unsatisfied because
Yeah.
they have no relationship with Christ. And that doesn't, by the way, completely exclude Christians killing themselves. I'm not.
No,
That's
yeah.
a whole other topic as well. That's terrible.
Yeah.
But last week, I think it was last week, Seth, I love the way you put it, because you said we need to try to reform when someone is possibly going after something rather than deform by putting them down or something like that. I actually love that, bro. I had to write it down again because it kind of goes into, I'm looking at a couple of guys who have been coaches. And so I want to touch that topic for a moment, because when you're coaching, it's the same as discipling, right? That's what discipling means. Only now, instead of, like you just said, Joe, instead of telling them, hey, you have to be better, achieve, because they have to lose, now you bring that coaching experience into Christianity and say, I want you to be better. You need to be a better Christian. And, the standard of the law is still the standard, though Christ fulfilled it, because we want to represent him. So now how do you disciple? How do you coach people who are saying, hey, I believe in Jesus. I come to church to make sure the pastor sees me, but all of a sudden I have something different. I have a tugging on my heart. Now, how do I enter into this quote unquote fold, or how do I say I want to be a better believer? Now, how do you coach that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as a coach, I'll talk first because then he's got like the extra mega coaching experience. So he can, we would have players come in, and they would come in once a week to do these trainings, and we wouldn't let them talk to us much because we had a half hour, and we're like, you need to do what we say, and you need to follow through. And so they would do good for a half hour, and then they would leave. And they'd have, hey, you go do this drill, whatever, before you go. And then they'd come back, and for the first 20 minutes of the lesson, I had to go over everything that we had done the time before, because it was obviously didn't do anything. They didn't learn anything or do any of the drills that I suggested that for them to do. And that was really something where I started to notice, like, hey, if you are really serious about becoming a better player, you need to come here twice a week. I know it's extra money, or at least come here once a week, and then be diligent to do the training that we have asked you to do at home. And that is what brought players to another level in their development, is their commitment to the process. Because a lot of times players, us, as Christians, we are Sunday. We go there on Sunday, and we come back, and we're like, man, I need some more. I need another hit, another shot of something, and then for 30 minutes after church we feel good, and then we just get back into it. And there's this cycle where we're not actually being committed to the process of becoming a disciple, and that doesn't mean that for people who are genuinely trying to do that, there will be that up and down scenarios that we've been discussing. But for me, when I think about discipline, baseball really taught me discipline. I actually didn't have coaches. I didn't have people to train me. I was doing everything myself, and I didn't have, all my coaches in Michigan were people who had played in high school but had no other formal coaching experience, and they were horrible coaches. The squish the bug thing and all that stuff. That's not real. And
T-ball stuff.
Like, now we're getting into my stuff. I love it.
Yeah, right.
Squish the bug.
You don't squish the bug. Sorry. He can talk more about this, but your back half is really where all your stuff, all the stuff comes from. But you have to know that. You have to know where your power comes from, and for baseball players, it's the back half of your body, and the front half doesn't do as much. It has to stay straight, or at least for the way that we would train, is you had to be a point where you were solid and you could push through to the baseball that way. But I bring that up because a lot of times Christians, we just go to the plate and we just throw whatever we have, and we have no plan, we have nothing, because we didn't spend any time with God. And this is my favorite line from a rapper. I'm
excited. I'm excited.
Yeah, NF. Well, he says,
Tupac?
"We watch the news in our living rooms with our big screens, and we're asking if God's really real, then where is He?" And he said, the same God that we think doesn't exist becomes real when something happens. And I like that line because we're in this comfort. The picture is we're in this comfortable place, and we're questioning why all these bad things happen when we're fine and comfortable where we are. And the reason that I love that is because that's not the Christian life.
Yeah.
The Christian life is not in your comfort. It's out in the world, speaking, living, doing the things that Christ did, which includes getting away from people, praying, being by yourself, studying the Word, and then coming back, and now you go into your life. Now, how does it get with baseball training? That's where our power comes from. Our power comes from God. And if we can get alone with Him and we know where our power comes from, then we have a better plan to get up to the plate, hit the ball, and sometimes we don't do it well.
That's good.
The whole time you're talking, I kept paying attention to your coffee, wondering if you're going to knock it onto the floor.
That's how.
I didn't want.
I listened though, but I was like, he went like this. I was like, oh.
I'm really good at spatial awareness.
Seth is sharing all this deep insight, and you're just like,
the coffee.
Like you're going to knock that coffee over.
You interrupted Joey.
No, I interrupted you.
Well, I'm interrupting everyone because here's the reason why I'm asking that.
Yeah.
Because your time is valuable, and I appreciate you coming here. I really do.
Yeah.
Knowing that we do have listeners that reach out to us, including in other countries, which we're so blessed by, that say, like, we want to hear the practical application. Like, thank you for sharing that because I've struggled with X, Y, or Z. Thank you because of this. And so I'm asking you that, Seth, and I thank you because what I'm asking is for our listeners, we've been telling the stories, and I can't wait to have you back on, right, at some point. But we want to know your backstory and who you are.
Yeah.
But now I'm saying, how do we, in the next several minutes, reach out to a listener and say, hey, man, whether it's athletics, job promotion, approbation, lust, like you got to be good at something, how do we practically apply just Christianity into just our daily life? How do we kind of disciple, and how do we look for that in a church? If we're going to church, we should be discipled, and we should also, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to kind of tie those together, just even for the listener to hear that it's a real thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, one of the things that I always tying it back in the sport, right, is with it is going, well, why did I put so much time, dedication? Why did I have so much discipline? Why did I have all those things for my sport? Well, I loved it first. I didn't do any of those things before I loved it first, right? And so, for example, I think, again, especially obviously through Galatians and Romans, and some of this is like Paul is trying to get this message through. It's not that the law doesn't matter, right? It's not that, we should just abandon it and we can go do whatever we want and we can just ask for grace back from God and we can just move on with our things. But also he's painting the image of what comes first, right? And I think along with that is like my sanctification process is like, I kind of explained it. Where I asked guys, I was like, hey, if you met somebody and every time they went out of the house and they were married, right, they're like, don't cheat on your wife, 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 right? That guy's probably going to cheat on his wife, right? But instead, right, if I'd be like, no, I love my wife so much, I would never even think of that. Like I would never even do that, right? And I think spending time like with God in that same way, right? And we built the relationship piece, and Paul's like so big on like you don't understand like the relationship that I have with God, right? Like we have religion, but how many of us, like the Pharisees, they had religion, right? But they lacked relationship, and they didn't understand practically how to roll it out, right? Where it's like they knew the law verbatim, right. They knew the Bible inside and out. They were studying God's word, but with that as well, like practically, how did it actually show up in their life? And again, I would much rather walk and be the voice and hands and feet of God than be able to just recite his word, right? Because, even demons can do that, right? Like that. So it's not about just believing that Jesus is who he says he is, but obviously following, who he says he is. And also to want to though, right? Not his burden is light when it's a relationship. Like, for example, like not cheating on my wife is light when we have this very loving, like, why would I ever want to do that to you if we have this deep interconnected relationship where it's like, again, it's not even a thought in my head. Right. And so I say this with players is one of the biggest things is how to actually apply this out is the first thing I think Jesus would do as a coach is just like he did to everybody else in the Bible when they were far from him is first to love them and love them right where they're at. Right. The Samaritan, like it not only that, just like, the woman at the well, right? For example, right? Or the thief on the cross, right? Like they might be far, right? But he knows where their hardwoods, like the first thing they need to do is I'm going to love them first. Right. And so a lot of our athletes on the same side of that is loving them exactly where they are, regardless of what their religion is, regardless of, where they're actually, at in their walk, and wanting to live a life that like makes them go, hey, why is he so different? Why is he so, why does he got so much joy? Why does he get so much peace? Why does he get, and reflecting it in that way. Right. And then also, along with that, like we obviously, because I'm really out there with my faith, like, they start to ask these questions. Right. And for example, when I coached out in Utah, again, a lot of our players were Mormon, right? And at the time, if I've never lived in Utah, and you kind of with us, like Sunday, ain't nothing moving. Like they roll up the sidewalks, like we're done. Right now, downtown is a little bit different now, but if you're in the suburbs, it's still very much so like this. But also too, like one thing that doesn't get talked a lot about is there humans out there just like anybody else, right? And like there's people that struggle with heterosexuality, right? They struggle with a lot of times within a church, and what I don't want to be in because I know Jesus' heart is they'll get pushed out of the church. Right. They'll get pushed out of their own house because they don't, the family doesn't want to be seen by the church doing some of these things or allowing it to happen. Right. And so a lot of times with that, right? Like, well, where's that player going to go run? Right. Well, because I've loved him and I'm the support and I'm all those other things. Right. And, they come back to us and like, man, like, maybe it's not even them, but they saw it happen to their friend and it shook them, and things like that. And I think more with that is the root of all of that is as I get closer to Jesus, I'm more like him. He influences me, right? He changes my heart. He loves me. He's gentle with me, so I'm gentle with others, right? Like I'm gentle in my correction, just like he's gentle with me in his correction, right? And gentle doesn't mean, and also too, just like when I say gentle, and it's very difficult, but Jesus does it for us too, right? Sometimes that's allowing us, right? And allowing them to go their path and not beating them over the head with the things, but letting them, on the same side of that is loving them through all of that, and also trying, because he's unconditional with his love towards me, is also being unconditional with their love towards them. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't boundaries. That doesn't mean that, we just tell them that everything's okay and everything they do is X, Y, and Z. Like there is still, as coaches, right? I go and I challenge them and I do these other things and I bring them back for where they want to go or what they want as well. But a lot of them, again, for example, is like their identities are really tied up within their sport and their achievement and how they're seen by others and external validation and the accolades and the achievements. And so, a lot of times that's a big thing for me with them as well is I identify these things because I know, I still struggle with these things as well. I might be a little bit further down that path or whatever, but I haven't achieved it. I haven't, I haven't checked the box and I'm done now. Right. And so I try to give them and extend some advice like, hey, when I'm feeling like that, or hey, when I'm struggling with these things, or man, like I still struggle with, major anxieties within the business. And, it might be a different spectrum. Like, for example, like my investor compared to me, right? I might be worried about $100,000. He's worried about 100 million. And I'm like, yo, okay. Like we got different in those paths, right? And that's what you have to get to that level for you to feel that anxiety. And I might feel it like this, and he might feel it with $100, or he might feel it because coach put him in the worst hitting group on the whole team, and that's giving him a whole bunch of anxiety, and it's dismantling his life right now, right? Or he's not starting, and he's never not started in his entire life. I mean, I got one of the things I think is the biggest lie within the space is like everybody always says, well, professional athletes, like they're the toughest and mentally and all these other things. I've trained a lot of all-stars, Hall of Fame, type caliber players, and they don't, like, for example, like, and I know this is gonna be like a hot take here, right? When I watched the interviews of Michael Jordan talking about his sport, I see a lot of it's like the opposite. A lot of people think that they have something you don't have, but it's actually the opposite. I think they lack something everybody else does have. And what I mean by that is they're so broken, right? Most of the time, the most elite performers, like again, even me, what pushed me was these toxic motivations that drove me, like where it's like, you know, like for example, like Michael Jordan, like nobody wants to be in the same room with him, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't want to be your friend. You're not attracting people to you. You're repelling people, you know, from you. And then like it's all, but that's also a motivator, right? And it's like it's feeding this wolf inside of you, right? That like it's used as your power source, right? But what does it leave you, right? Like the emptiness, the like when I listen to Jordan talk, I'm like, man, you don't have that joy.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
100%.
like you're lacking that peace. Like you're, you know, like you've achieved all these things and I respect you for all these things. And I respect, you know, like, man, like you're Michael Jordan, right? Like I get it. Right. But then one time Jesus checked me with this, right? He goes, I was trying to model Kobe, right? I was trying to model those things. And he's like, did I call you to be like Kobe or... right, like and it was a check for me of realizing like what am I idolizing, right? And what am I chasing after? Am I trying to be Michael Jordan, right? Or like that's earthly, right? That's my flesh of like how I want to be seen and glorified, and you know all the achievements and all these other things, and so that's one of the things I do with athletes a lot too, is just like helping them understand that it's like, man, like my job every day is to bring my bread and my fish. The difference is the enemy will try to convince me that I'm responsible for the miracle, and I'm not responsible for the miracle. The little boy, if you woke up that morning and he said, hey, you're going to go feed, 5,000 people, right? You're going to go do these other things, right? The enemy will try to convince you that you're responsible for the miracle, right? Like you're responsible for them going to Christ. Like you're responsible for them giving their life over. You're responsible for all these other things. And it's like, no. I'm responsible to bring my bread and my fish, right? And he needs my bread and my fish, right? Yeah. He's asking me. He's asking me to participate, and he's allowing me to participate. And what a beautiful thing that is. But just a reminder every day when I start having a bunch of anxiety, right? And I really struggle with anxiety, and I've gotten so much better. I go to therapy, I do all these other things, right? And it's generational. My family, like, generations of anxiety and stress and achievement and all these things, right? And all these things. And one of the things that's such a grounding thing for me, and it's been such a big part of my season lately, is been like, Joey, just bring your bread and your fish. Just bring your bread and your fish. It doesn't mean, I'm trusting him with the result. I'm trusting him that a deeper trust, like God, even if, right? If you turn all evil for good. So no matter what happens, you're going to use this too. When I was an atheist, you use that too. The brokenness in the world, like you'll use that too. If it doesn't go how I want it to be, first off, like, thank you, because like I want it to go how you want it to go anyways, right? But the deeper trust with that is like the reminder for me and my anxiety when things aren't going the way that I want them to go, is the reminder of just like, bring my bread and my fish. And I do that with the players too. It's like, I'm bringing my bread and my fish, and I'm going to do the best I can today, but also too, the result is not in my hands. There's the more you try to control things, the less control you have. The more you surrender it, like the more control you actually have. And also too, I like to flip the word discipline. That's just self-control, right? So where is that? Well, that's a fruit of the Spirit. That's not something that I have, right? It's not something that I develop. It's something on the opposite side of that. It's a fruit that I receive, and it's a gift from God. And even when I was disciplined, right, and when I was playing, like that was a gift that he gave me, right? He gave me the passion in my heart, right? He gave me the gift to want to go and do those things and to be passionate. Like I didn't create that, right. That he burnt that burning desire in my heart. And so, to give that back over to him and to give it back to him is, God, this is yours anyways. It always was. I can fight that all I want, and I could this life is yours. Like me, I'm yours. Yeah. So at the end of the day, like when I start becoming my own little God, and what I think, he's really put on my heart lately too. If I can share this too, and probably maybe he's preparing me to share this, was, he's really put on my heart, coveting lately. And, we run past it a lot, right? Cause it's associated obviously in the 10 Commandments. It's like, don't covet after your neighbor's wife. And we just, that's it. But like coveting obviously is a lot deeper than that. Right. Yeah. And so I asked him, again, how this is playing out is I asked him like, well, why is coveting such a bad sin, right? You listed it on the 10 Commandments right next to murder, right? Like what, to me, murder has this weight. Like, why is this spiritually such a heavy thing that you brought up in the, 10 Commandments? And, he kind of shared this with me as we wrestled is understanding that, like, first off, what you're saying is what I've provided isn't enough. That's one, right? Because you want more, right? Two, you're also saying on the other side of that is that you're taking away my divinity, right? You're denying my divinity, that what I have for you and the plan that I have for you and what I am giving you or not giving you is that you know better, or you know all those other things. And like, obviously these all build walls between us and God, right? And it builds a black pit in our heart, right? And again, we start to chase after our own desires. We start to chase after all these other things. And so a lot of my anxiety is rooted in coveting, of wanting and desiring something I don't currently have, or a result that didn't play out in the way that I wanted it to play out, right? And so that was a big thing as I've been working through the season of really battling this, I would say, spiritual warfare. And again, I know people, I don't know how deep everybody gets, but like spiritual warfare has become such a massive thing for me, of understanding that, like, it's like, that's a demon of anxiety, right? It's something that is latched on to, it's latched on to our whole family, right? And it's been feeding off of all of us, right? And I could be the one, like, where God like blessed in the same way of like being able to look it in the face and being like, you're wrong, like, and like that was a lie. Like, I don't need those things, and like everything I do have. And also too, like, try not to get emotional with it, but like literally the other day I was in a therapy and I was telling him, I was like, I literally got so mad, and I was crying about it, like when I was by myself, and I shared it with my therapist. And I was like, I just realized how much God has been loving me with, and how much peace and joy he's offered me. And I've been not accepting it. Like, God doesn't love us conditionally. We accept his love conditionally. And so much of my life had been robbed by what I thought needed to happen. And it caused me so much loss of peace and joy and, anxiety. And like, it's robbed me of so much of my life, and I got to the point, like, almost like I connect so much, with that is with drug addicts and things that they, people forget. They get lost in the drug, but they don't understand that there's a deeper soul thing that's going on, right? And so I think about that as well. It's like a drug addict. Like, I'm addicted too. Mine might not be. It's a little bit more accepted, in society, right? It's not a drug, but the drug for me, right, is the achievement. The drug for me is external validation. The drug for me is those other things, right? The drug for me is getting what I want,
right?
And so it literally, I got to the point, just like how drug addicts will get to a point where they're like, I want this to change. Like, I got mad, and I'm just like, and coming to him, and it was just like, came to God in anger, right? Like, I don't want to live this way anymore. And I want you to break me from these things. And I understand that, like, I remember one time I was sitting in the shower with that, right? And I'm just crying to God. And I'm like literally saying, like, almost speaking in tongues there, right? Is like saying to God over and over and over again, like, I know I'm the problem. I know I'm the problem. I know I'm the problem. And like saying this over and over again. And it was like every time I would say it, I felt like it was releasing me of all of these pains, things that have been holding me back, from so many things. But yeah.
That's awesome.
Bro, you bring up so many amazing thoughts that we're trying to discuss, that we're trying to share, again, trying to be the ministry that we are.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to come to a close for a few reasons. I know that also Seth has a timely issue going on as well. But listen,
1 minute late, Seth.
Yeah, but you'll be okay, I think, because I want to get a couple closing thoughts from you guys and from our guest, Joey. I had to write this down. I shared this earlier. I always have to write down because my mind, I just have so many thoughts when people are talking. But a couple things you said. But you're talking about, we kind of brought it all the way back to media, social media. In this, how you were kind of saying, when you're looking at it and you start looking at social media, it's like you're never enough. Like, achievement is your drug. You sort of shared that.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking, like, think about it. Social media in general is like a drug pusher. It's telling you have not achieved enough. You are not enough until X, Y, or Z, until you get this newest this or this newest that. That's what, and it bombards us.
Yeah.
And then you're saying that, and I'm like, wow, you're right, because like, oh, this person's doing better, or this company's doing better, this.
You see the highlight reels on social media. You see all the goods.
All you see is the good in
bad,
people's lives. We've talked about this, right? It's all you see is because we don't put our dirty laundry out there, right? I don't know if people still use that term.
Yeah. Would you say though, one of the things I think about with that within social media though, I think it just amplifies what was already happening, right?
Yeah.
What do we do when we go in the world, right? We give out our highlight tape.
Yeah.
We don't get our dirty laundry in the back, right?
No.
We bring out our highlight tape. Now social media is just another extension of what was already, happening.
And it's like this concentration that we can put out there.
Yeah, but the problem is that everybody can see it. So you have kids who like, why can't I be that guy? Why can't I act like that? I don't. How come I'm not good enough to be that? So that's
the
where
dopamine hits.
the dopamine
it's crazy.
hits.
Their view is so crazy. And so I want to kind of, in closing, I love what you said about how God allows me to participate. I love that you share the thought of bringing the bread and the fish. Yeah. So can we close on that thought that how blessed we are that he allows us to participate because he does not need us.
No.
Can you provide some closing thoughts on just this totality of what we talked about, Seth? I don't know if we can do that, and then we'll close with Joey.
Seth's in a panic. He's like, I gotta go get my kids.
Yeah.
No.
They're waiting on the corner.
Because it's powerful. We've talked about coaching. We've talked about disciples. To be honest, we went all over the spectrum on this one. We'll come back and come up with a singular topic. We're unscripted. That's the point of this. We just met Joey for the first time.
Yeah.
But there's so much content. It's crazy. God allows us to participate in this, though, guys. That's amazing.
Yeah. I think I just want to highlight one thing that Joey said earlier is that it starts from love. Is that the only way that we can get to a point where we can be in the shower and be praying things that are just chains are being broken is because we love God. And not only that, but we recognize that God loves us. Jesus, before he went on his ministry, he's baptized, and what did God say to his son? This is my beloved son.
Yeah.
And that's what Jesus went out from was that place where God, the place of love that his Father had for us. And so that's where we need to start from is, do I have that love of God? Am I trying to earn God's love in maybe some way or shape or form? Am I trying to be good enough in areas, or do I have a God that's even somewhere else that's not my Father? And I need to repent of that and just accept the love of God, accept the gift of his Spirit, so that we can walk in the life that he's called us to.
Yeah. No, in closing, I mean, I suffer from anxiety big time. Like social anxiety is the worst for me. Going in big crowds, I have to leave. And that's why I ask God for wisdom. I pray that every day to get to know him better. We talked about it last time. That relationship with him just helps me every day. And then when I'm not there, when I'm not in the Word, when I'm not having that relationship, that's when it pops back up. Where it's like, hey, you gotta come have that relationship with me. We talked about it last week. It's like, why do we sin? Why do Christians sin? Do we not love Jesus enough? And like, I do, but I'm also lazy about my day. So I get it, man. I really want to put that work in and have that relationship, So I appreciate it. It was great.
Hey, we very much appreciate you. Got any 5-second final thoughts here? If it turns 5 minutes, that's fine. But final thoughts, man.
No, it's not.
No. I thank you guys for Again, I love just sharing my relationship with God and getting the platform to be able to do it. So I appreciate it. And
appreciate it.
Happy to come on whenever.
Thank you very much. We're done.
All our listeners, man, be blessed, man.
Be blessed.